Excellent President, Excellencies, we have convened here today as we collectively grieve for the thousands of Israeli and Palestinian civilians who have lost their lives since 7th October. This is one of the darkest and most volatile periods that the Middle East has seen in recent years. Hamas's heinous and terrorist crimes of 7th October, as well as the indiscriminate rocket fire on civilians in Israel, which we condemn in the strongest possible terms, will resonate for generations, manifested as trauma, anguish, anger, and heartbreak. Many Israelis are still living the nightmare of knowing that their loved ones continue to suffer. Terror has no justification, and we must be clear in rejecting it. Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release all hostages. Israel has the right to self-defense in line with international humanitarian law, including the principles of distinction, necessity, and proportionality. On the other hand, on the other side of Gaza's wall, it is not only hostages who are suffering. Millions of Palestinian civilians are under siege with extremely limited access to water, food, fuel, electricity, medicine, or shelter, if any. In conformity with international law, all parties are obliged to ensure that civilians are protected. We must urgently and genuinely address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Malta continues to strongly call for the establishment of a humanitarian ceasefire or pauses and humanitarian corridors. People must be allowed to bury their dead. Hospitals need fuel and anesthesia. Over 2 million people require sustenance. Sustained provision of life-saving services is paramount. The protection of humanitarian facilities, such as hospitals and designated safe zones, and the unimpeded access for humanitarian and UN personnel, including aid convoys, is also critical. We are devastated to learn that 35 UNRWA humanitarians have lost their lives in Gaza. We commend the agency for its heroic work these past weeks. As diplomats, we urgently need to do our job to allow them the ability to keep doing theirs. Malta welcomes current efforts towards allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza through Rafah and commends all partners involved. However, we note the current volume of aid is limited and needs to be adequately scaled up. This crisis is also having a devastating impact on women and children. Ensuring that humanitarian supplies are gender responsive and that women are involved in distribution is essential for meeting the needs of women and girls who are at higher risk of gender-based violence and psychological trauma. President, the conflict has reawakened tangible risks of regional fissures and increased further uncertainty in an already turbulent world. We must collectively unite to mitigate any risks or miscalculations which may lead this conflict to spill over into the West Bank or into the broader Middle East region. We call for all parties to exercise restraint, de-escalate, and respect the norms of international law. In view of such urgent necessities and risks, Malta is now closely working together with the elected members of the Security Council on a text that we hope can garner consensus and address the situation on the ground. Palestinians have, for far too long, dreamt of a reality which embraces their legitimate aspirations, which isn't choked by decades of occupation, violence, and displacement, a reality which ensures the dignity of their children. Israelis too deserve to live in peace and security without being held hostage by terror. To this end, Malta remains committed to a lasting and sustainable peace in the Middle East, a peace which is based on a two-state solution along the pre-1967 borders, addressing the legitimate aspirations of both sides, with Jerusalem as a future capital of two states, living side by side in peace and security. in line with the relevant Security Council resolutions and internationally agreed parameters. We therefore urge all member states to support the draft resolution which is before us today. Peace is not optional and demands to be steered by a recognition of our common humanity. Thank you.
This has been the Nod News Network. Transmission complete.